I'm Catherine Carter. I'm a beautiful 29-year-old, and the day my mom and sister laughed at me publicly at an auction became the day I bought the mansion they came to win. This story is painful, intense, and unbelievable. Stay with me till the very end, because every part of it matters. Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from: Houston, Chicago, Atlanta, New York, anywhere in the US. I need you to understand something right now. When you walk into a room and hear your own mother's laughter cutting through the crowd like a knife aimed directly at your chest, when you feel hundreds of eyes turn toward you because your sister just announced loud enough for everyone to hear that you're the broke one who probably can't even afford the parking fee, something inside you either breaks completely or turns to steel. For me, it became steel. Cold, unbreakable steel. The Riverside Estate auction house was packed that Saturday afternoon. You know the type of crowd: wealthy investors in tailored suits, real estate moguls with their assistants trailing behind them, old money families who attend these events like their social gatherings. The air smelled like expensive perfume and older money. Crystal chandeliers hung from 20-foot ceilings. Everything about that place screamed exclusivity, power, and wealth. And there I was, walking through those massive oak doors in a simple black blazer and pants, my hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, carrying nothing but a small leather portfolio. I saw them immediately. How could I not? My mother, Patricia Carter, was wearing a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her jewelry caught the light with every movement she made. And my sister, Victoria, 26 years old and dripping with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no, never having been pushed out, never having had to build anything from nothing. She wore red, always red, because she loved being the center of attention. They were standing near the registration table, surrounded by their usual circle of society friends, people who measured worth in property titles and stock portfolios. And the moment Victoria spotted me, her face lit up with that cruel amusement I knew so well. She leaned over to our mother and whispered something. They both turned to look at me. And then they laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full, mocking laugh that carried across the marble floors and echoed off the walls. "Oh my God, Mom, look who decided to show up," Victoria said, her voice deliberately loud. "Catherine actually came. What is she even doing here? Does she think she's going to bid on something?" My mother smiled, that particular smile that never reached her eyes, the one I'd seen directed at me countless times growing up. "Darling, maybe she's here to watch. To see how successful people conduct business. It could be educational for her." The people around them laughed. Actually laughed. Like I was the punchline to a joke they'd all been waiting to hear. I felt every eye in that vicinity turn toward me. Some people looked away quickly, embarrassed for me. Others stared with curiosity or pity. A few smiled with that knowing look that said they understood exactly what was happening. Family drama playing out in public. And me? I said nothing. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I didn't argue or justify my presence. I simply walked past them with my head up, my expression neutral, and made my way toward the registration desk. Because here's what I'd learned over the past 11 years since they kicked me out of their lives. Silence is the most powerful response you can give to people who expect you to break down, to beg for their approval, to prove yourself worthy of their acceptance. Let me tell you why I stayed silent. Let me tell you what I was hiding behind that calm exterior. Because every single person in that auction house, including my mother and sister, had absolutely no idea who I had become. And that was exactly how I wanted it. By the way, if you're still watching, that means you're invested, so why not subscribe? Or tell me in the comments why you refuse to. I'm genuinely curious. The mansion they were there to win, the Whitmore Estate, was legendary in our city. $14 million. 12,000 square feet of pure architectural magnificence sitting on 8 acres of waterfront property. Built in 1924 by the Whitmore family, it had been featured in magazines, used as a filming location for movies, and had become a symbol of ultimate success in our community. The family had finally decided to sell, and the auction had been announced 3 months earlier. From the moment that announcement went public, my mother and Victoria had talked about nothing else. They'd attended every open house, hired appraisers, consulted with their financial advisors, and most importantly, they'd told everyone they knew that they were going to win that property. It had become their obsession, their statement piece. Victoria had already planned her housewarming party. Mom had contacted interior designers. They'd made it their mission to own that estate, and they'd made sure every person in their social circle knew about it. They expected competition, of course. They weren't naive. But what they didn't expect, what they couldn't have possibly imagined, was that I would be the one to take it from them. Let me take you back. Because you need to understand how I got here, standing in that auction house, while my family mocked me without knowing they were mocking a multimillionaire. I was 18 years old when my mother sat me down in our living room. Well, their living room, the one I'd grown up in but apparently never really belonged in, and told me that I needed to find my own way. Those were her exact words. "Catherine, you need to find your own way." My father had passed away 2 years earlier, and apparently, without him there to advocate for me, I'd become expendable. Victoria was the golden child, the one who'd gotten into the right schools, dated the right boys, said the right things at dinner parties. I was the difficult one, the one who questioned things, who wanted to study business instead of finding a wealthy husband who didn't fit into their perfect picture. So they pushed me out. Not dramatically, not with screaming or fighting, just coldly, systematically, efficiently. They paid for 1 semester of community college and told me I was on my own after that. I moved into a studio apartment that was barely bigger than a closet. I worked 3 jobs, waitressing in the mornings, retail in the afternoons, and cleaning offices at night. I slept 4 hours if I was lucky. I lived on ramen noodles and whatever free food I could get from the restaurant where I worked. But I also studied. God, did I study. Business administration, real estate law, market analysis, investment strategies. I consumed knowledge like it was oxygen. And while I was working myself to exhaustion, while I was building something from absolutely nothing, my mother and Victoria never called. Never asked how I was doing. Never checked if I was okay. They'd written me out of their story completely, like I'd never existed. By 22, I'd graduated with honors. By 24, I'd started my own company, a real estate analytics startup that used AI and big data to predict property values and market trends. By 26, I'd secured my first major contract with a national real estate firm. By 28, my company was valued at $42 million. And now, at 29, I was worth more than my mother and sister combined. But I'd never told them. Why would I? They'd never asked about my life. In the rare moments when we crossed paths at family funerals or weddings, they'd smile politely and make small talk before moving on to people they actually cared about. They assumed I was still struggling, still barely getting by, still the failure they'd decided I would be. And I let them believe it, because their ignorance was my power. If you've ever been underestimated too, hit subscribe. And if not, then comment why you think this channel doesn't deserve your subscription. So there I was at the registration desk, and the woman behind it looked up at me with a professional smile. "Name, please?" "Catherine Carter," I said quietly. "I should be pre-registered as a premium bidder." Her eyes widened slightly as she typed my name into her computer. Then her entire demeanor shifted. She sat up straighter. Her smile became genuine, almost reverent. "Ms. Carter, yes, of course. We've been expecting you. Your verification came through from your bank yesterday. Your paddle number is 7, and you've been assigned to the platinum bidder section. Can I get you anything? Water? Champagne?" "I'm fine, thank you," I said, taking the paddle she handed me. It was heavier than the standard ones, made of polished wood with my number engraved in gold. Behind me, I heard my sister's voice crack slightly. "Wait, what? Premium bidder? Catherine?" I didn't turn around. I simply walked toward the auction hall, feeling their confusion and shock radiating behind me like heat. That's when their narrative started to crumble. That's when the first crack appeared in their certainty about who I was and what I was capable of. The auction hall was magnificent. Rows of velvet chairs faced a raised platform where the auctioneer would stand. Giant screens on either side displayed property details and current bids. The platinum section was at the front, separated by a red velvet rope, with wider seats and more space. I took my seat and waited. My mother and Victoria entered minutes later, frantically looking for me. When they spotted me in the platinum section, Victoria actually stopped walking, just froze in the middle of the aisle with her mouth slightly open. Mom grabbed her arm and pulled her toward their seats in the general section, about 10 rows behind me. I could feel their eyes boring into the back of my head, could almost hear the frantic whispered conversation they were having. The auction began with smaller properties. A downtown condo went for $1.2 million. A commercial building sold for $3.8. The crowd was energetic, competitive. These were people who thrived on the thrill of winning, of possessing something others wanted. And with each property that sold, the anticipation built for the main event. Finally, the auctioneer, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a commanding voice, stepped forward with a different energy. Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the crown jewel of today's auction, the Whitmore estate. The screens lit up with images of the mansion. Sweeping aerial views of the property, interior shots of the grand staircase and ballroom, the waterfront gardens, the historic architecture. The crowd collectively held its breath. Built in 1924, recently renovated while maintaining its historic integrity, 12,000 square feet, 8 acres, waterfront access, this property represents not just a home, but a legacy. We'll start the bidding at $8 million. Hands shot up immediately. The auctioneer's voice became rhythmic, almost musical. 8 million. I have 8 million. Do I hear 8.5? 8.5 from paddle 42. Do I hear 9? 9 million from paddle 18. I sat perfectly still, my paddle resting on my lap, my hands folded over it. I watched the numbers climb. 9.5 million. 10 million. 10.5. 11. Behind me, I heard Victoria's voice, trying to sound confident, but with an edge of desperation. 12 million. She was standing now, her paddle raised high, making sure everyone saw her bid. 12 million from paddle 37, the auctioneer acknowledged. Do I hear 12.5? Another bidder jumped in. Then another. The price climbed to 13 million. Then 13.2. Victoria countered every bid, her voice getting louder, more aggressive. My mother was standing next to her now, both of them clearly determined to win no matter what. At 13.8 million, there were only 3 bidders left. Victoria, an older gentleman in the platinum section, and a woman representing a real estate development company. The tension in the room was electric. People had stopped bidding on their phones and were watching the drama unfold. 14 million, Victoria shouted, her voice cracking slightly. That was it. I knew from everything I'd heard over the past months that 14 million was their absolute limit. They'd leveraged everything they had to reach that number. The other 2 bidders hesitated. 14 million was already above the property's appraised value. The auctioneer scanned the room. 14 million from paddle 37. Do I hear 14.2? 14.1? Anyone? The room was silent. Victoria was breathing hard, her face flushed with triumph. My mother had her hand on Victoria's shoulder, both of them smiling, already celebrating their victory. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Going once at 14 million. Going twice at 14 million. And that's when I raised my paddle. Just once. Calm, steady, confident. The movement was small, but in that silent room, it might as well have been an explosion. You're still here? It means the story is speaking to you. Go ahead, subscribe. And if you won't, drop a comment explaining why you're holding back. The auctioneer's eyes locked onto my paddle. His professional composure cracked for just a second into a genuine smile. 15 million from paddle 7. The room erupted. Not in bids, but in gasps, whispers, shocked exclamations. Heads turned toward me. I sat there, my expression unchanged, my paddle now resting back on my lap like I'd just ordered coffee instead of outbidding my family by $1 million. Behind me, I heard Victoria make a sound somewhere between a gasp and a cry. What?
No.
No, that's not, she can't. The auctioneer was professional enough to continue. 15 million from paddle 7. Do I hear 15.2? He looked at Victoria expectantly. She was frozen, staring at me with absolute disbelief. My mother's face had gone pale. They had no more money. They'd reached their limit. They'd bet everything on winning this property, on making this statement, and I'd just destroy their plans with a single bid. The silence stretched out. The auctioneer waited the required time. Going once at 15 million. Going twice at 15 million. He raised his gavel, looked around the room one final time, and then brought it down with a decisive crack. Sold. To paddle 7 for $15 million. The room applauded. It's tradition at these events to applaud major sales. But I barely heard it. All I could feel was this wave of something I can't quite describe, not happiness exactly, not revenge, but something deeper. Vindication maybe. Justice. The closing of a circle that had been left open for 11 years. I stood up calmly and walked toward the settlement area where the auction staff was already preparing the paperwork. As I passed my mother and Victoria's row, I didn't look at them. Didn't need to. I could feel their shock radiating off them like heat. The auction coordinator, a professional woman in her 40s, greeted me with a warm handshake. Miss Carter, congratulations. What a stunning acquisition. Let's get your paperwork started. We'll need verification of funds, which I see you've already arranged. Your bank representative should be here shortly. Everything's ready, I confirmed. I'd like to expedite the closing process if possible. My company will be using this property as our new headquarters. Your company? She asked with interest. Carter Analytics, I said. We specialize in real estate market predictions and investment strategies. This property will serve as our headquarters and also as a training center. We run a program for women entering the real estate industry, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. The symbolism of this location felt appropriate. She smiled broadly. That's wonderful. Congratulations again, Miss Carter. Behind me, I heard footsteps approaching rapidly. Then my mother's voice, strained and confused. Catherine. Catherine, wait. I turned slowly. Both of them stood there, Victoria with tears of frustration streaming down her face, my mother looking like she'd seen a ghost. How? Victoria demanded. Where did you get, you can't afford that. You can't afford $15 million. This is some kind of mistake. I looked at them both for a long moment. These two women who'd raised me, who'd cast me aside, who'd laughed at me less than an hour ago. And I felt nothing. No anger. No need to explain. No desire for their approval or acknowledgement. It's not a mistake, I said quietly. I own a successful company. I've done well for myself. Neither of you ever asked about my life, so you wouldn't know that. My mother's hand went to her throat, touching her pearls like she always did when she was anxious. A company? What company? Since when? Since I was 24, I replied. 7 years ago. Around the time you both stopped pretending to care whether I was alive or dead. The pain in my voice surprised even me. I thought I'd moved past all of this, thought I'd healed. But standing there, looking at their shocked faces, I realized the wound was still there. Scabbed over maybe, but not healed. Catherine, that's not fair, my mother started. Fair? I interrupted, my voice still quiet but with an edge now. You want to talk about fair? You pushed me out at 18. You never called, never checked on me, never asked if I was okay. And today, you laughed at me in front of hundreds of people because you assumed I was still struggling, still failing, still the disappointment you decided I was. So no, Mom. We're not going to talk about fair. Victoria wiped her eyes, mascara smearing. We didn't mean I didn't know you. Exactly, I said. You didn't know. You never asked to know. That was your choice. I turned back to the coordinator. Let's finish the paperwork. If this story inspired you even a little, hit that subscribe button. And if you still won't be brave, and tell me why. I read every comment. The next 2 hours were a blur of documents, bank transfers, title searches, and legal reviews. My attorney joined us via video call to review everything. The auction house staff treated me with immense respect, bringing me water, offering me their private office to work in, making sure every detail was handled perfectly. My mother and Victoria left at some point during the process. I didn't see them go. By the time I walked out of that auction house with the deed to the Whitmore estate in my portfolio, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I stood there for a moment, looking at the document that represented the biggest purchase of my life, and I felt this incredible sense of peace wash over me. I'd won. Not just the property. Not just the battle with my family. I'd won something much bigger. I'd proven to myself that I could rise from nothing, that I could build something meaningful, that I didn't need their approval or their support or their love to become successful. I'd done it all on my own. 3 weeks later, I was standing in the grand foyer of the Whitmore estate, watching contractors and designers transform the space. The marble floors were being polished, the chandeliers cleaned and restored, the walls repainted in warm, welcoming colors. The ballroom was being converted into a conference center. The library was becoming my personal office. The guest houses on the property were being turned into temporary housing for women in our training program. It felt surreal sometimes, walking through these rooms that I now owned, this symbol of wealth and status that had once seemed so impossibly out of reach. But more than that, it felt right. Like I'd finally come full circle, finally reclaimed not just success, but my own sense of self-worth. I was reviewing architectural plans in what would become the main training room when my assistant knocked on the doorframe. "Miss Carter? Your mother and sister are here. They say they need to speak with you." I felt my stomach tighten. I hadn't spoken to them since the auction. Hadn't responded to the texts Victoria had sent or the voicemails my mother had left. Part of me had hoped they'd just disappear from my life completely. But I should have known they'd come. "Show them to the garden," I said. "I'll be there in a minute." I took my time walking through the house, preparing myself mentally for whatever was about to happen. When I stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the water, I found them standing awkwardly near the fountain, looking small and out of place in this grand setting. My mother spoke first. "Catherine, thank you for seeing us." "I'm not sure I had much choice," I replied, keeping my distance. "What do you want?" Victoria stepped forward, and I could see she'd been crying recently. Her eyes were red, her makeup minimal, so different from her usual polished appearance. "We came to apologize. What we did at the auction, what we've done over the years, we were wrong." "I was wrong." My mother nodded, her own eyes glistening with tears. "We've been talking a lot these past few weeks. About how we treated you, about the things we said and did. And we realized we hurt you terribly. We pushed you away when you needed us most." I waited, saying nothing, giving them no easy comfort. "We'd like to make amends," my mother continued. "We'd like to be part of your life again, if you'll let us. We're so proud of what you've accomplished." "Stop," I said, holding up my hand. "You don't get to be proud now. You don't get to show up here, on property I bought without your help or your support, and claim pride in my accomplishments. You had 11 years to be proud. 11 years to pick up the phone, to show interest, to be my family. You chose not to." "We know," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "We know we don't deserve your forgiveness. But we're asking for it anyway. We're asking for a chance to be better, to be the family we should have been all along." I looked at them both, these two women who'd shaped so much of my pain, who'd driven me to prove myself in ways that had been both destructive and ultimately transformative. And I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not reconciliation. But something softer than the anger I'd carried for so long. "I accept your apology," I said carefully. "I do. And I'm glad you've realized the harm you caused. But accepting an apology doesn't mean things go back to how they were, because they can't. You can't be the family you should have been all along. That time is gone. You can only be what you choose to be from this point forward, and I can only decide what role, if any, I want you to have in my life." "What does that mean?" my mother asked quietly. "It means we can be civil," I said. "It means I won't carry hatred for you anymore, because that's not healthy for me. But it also means you don't get to walk back into my life like nothing happened." You don't get access to my inner world, my struggles, my victories. You lost that right. You might earn some of it back eventually, with time and consistent effort. But right now? Right now, we're just people who share DNA and a painful history. Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face. That's more than we deserve. Maybe, I agreed. But it's what I'm offering. Take it or leave it. My mother reached out like she wanted to hug me, then stopped herself. We'll take it. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for giving us even this much. I watched them leave, walking back through my mansion, through the home I'd built from my own success, and I felt something release in my chest. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about releasing myself from the weight of carrying their betrayal around like a stone. That evening, I stood alone on the balcony of the master suite, looking out over the water as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The mansion was quiet around me, full of potential, full of possibility. In 2 months, it would be filled with women learning the real estate trade, building their own success stories, creating their own paths to independence. The truth was, buying this mansion had never been about revenge. Not really. Yes, outbidding my family had felt good in the moment. Yes, watching their faces when they realized who I'd become had satisfied something dark and hurt inside me. But the real victory wasn't in taking something from them. It was in becoming someone who didn't need anything from them at all. True revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about making others suffer. It was about building a life so complete, so fulfilling, so undeniably yours that their opinions became irrelevant. It was about reaching a place where their approval meant nothing because you'd already approved of yourself. It was about transforming pain into power, rejection into resilience, exile into independence. I was Carter, 29 years old, owner of a multi-million-dollar company, owner of this incredible estate, and most importantly, owner of my own story, my own worth, my own unshakable sense of self. They couldn't give that to me and they couldn't take it away. I'd built it myself, from nothing, with nothing but determination and refusal to let their rejection define me. And standing there on that balcony, looking out at the life I'd created, I realized something profound. I'd finally found my way home. Not to a place or a family, but to myself. And that was the greatest victory of all.